Meta-language for the interpretive unit. Now, feature articles can slide between being persuasive and interpretive text. They can have a strong call to action, making them persuasive, or they can be more thoughtful examinations of a topic, making them a lot more interpretive. We're going to be doing them as interpretive texts. Now let's have a look at some of the language features that I'm going to ask you to identify in text that I give you and to use when you write your own. Descriptive language, emotive language, speech, figurative language, tone, colloquial language, jargon, imagery, symbolism, irony, allusion, evidence, inclusive language, exclusive language, rhetorical questions, diction and connotations of word choice, analogy, generalizations, humor, colloquial language, formal language, repetition, attacks, appeals, irony, hyperbole, tricolon. Don't forget your stylistic features, narrative point of view, structure of paragraphs and chapters, juxtaposition, sound devices, spelling and grammatical choices, motifs and reoccurring or extended metaphors, figurative language, tone and word choice, voice. We're going to have a look at some of these in a little bit more detail, though I know you've come across them in your schooling. We just want you to be really sure about some of these definitions. So let's look at descriptive language. It's a deliberate use of language that uses adjectives and adverbs to describe part of the story, or in your case the article. An adjective is a word used to describe and give information about a noun, whereas an adverb is about how, when or where the action happened. Emotive language are words that are used to evoke an emotional response in the reader. For example, if you want to evoke the emotion of anger in your audience, you may use one or more of the following words: repulsive, shameful, terrible, shocking, disgusted. These sorts of words that position your reader emotionally. Now, you're used to using metaphor, simile, personification and hyperbole, and they're still able to be used in this non-fiction form, and here are some definitions for you to go over later just to remind yourself of what they are. Tone is very important in this non-fiction type of writing, and it describes the way the voice is delivered. The author will purposely select words which establish their tone. You should consider the connotations of the words they choose in order to identify tone, and of course when you're writing one later yourself. Now, a connotation is the associated or secondary meaning of the word or expression in addition to its explicit or primary meaning. So, say taking the bottom one there, if you use a childish tone, that can have quite negative connotations, and we think of words that are, immature, annoying or juvenile when we hear it. This may indicate the author's tone might be critical when it's describing this character. You'll probably take a relatively authoritative tone when you're writing because you'll be writing with some credibility, but of course you also want to be making personal connections with your reader, so you will be wanting to not be too authoritative, too above them, otherwise you may alienate them. Colloquial language is language that's used in ordinary or familiar conversation which is not formal, and it's a way of connecting with your reader and identifying what cultural groups you belong to. As what I was talking about before, that you don't want to be too authoritative, you want to actually seem like you're somebody that they can relate to. And here is a collection of Aussie colloquialisms, so they look a bit old. I'm not sure if we use words like that anymore, but you'd recognise more contemporary ones like "oh my god." Jargon is special words or expressions used by a professional group that are difficult for others to understand. Using a few of them that are recognisable to most people will show that you have done some sort of work on the subject that you're writing about, that you are actually have some credibility. But again, be a little bit careful not to overuse them. You want your reader to be able to understand what you're talking about. Allusions. An allusion is a brief and indirect reference to a person, place, thing or idea of historical, cultural, literary or political significance. As a reader, your ability to spot illusions rests on your existing knowledge, so you don't want them to be too obscure. You want to be ones that people can actually recognise. I got an example here. Say I wrote, "This was surely going to be Hopkins Watergate." Here I'd be referring to the scandal that brought down the American president, and most people of my generation or older would recognise that that means that the person Hopkins is in some kind of legal trouble that could threaten their position. Don't forget your sound devices like onomatopoeia, alliteration and assonance, so the definitions of which are below and the examples above on the page. They are really great ways to provide emphasis on ideas or thoughts that you're trying to convey to your reader, and or when you're reading somebody else's work where they've put some sort of emphasis on these words, it means that they want you to notice something about that, pay particular attention. You will probably be using evidence, which can also be referred to as exemplification, such as statistics, expert opinion, and anecdotal evidence. When using sources for quotes, do consider their cultural collateral. Do they add relevance or credibility to your work? If you're looking at a medical situation, a doctor might be a good source, but if you're looking at some sort of, cultural thing, you might be wanting to look at a celebrity or someone like that. Make sure that the person that you choose and the way you choose to frame them, like calling them doctor, whatever, is really showcasing their cultural collateral when you're writing. And when you're reading other people's work, you'll notice that they do that as well. Inclusive and exclusive language is really, really important about, who is the in-group, who is the other group, who is we, who is them. You're using it to set up sides, to indicate who should be doing something and who isn't, who is the focus, who is the villain, who is the good person, who is the vulnerable group. You should be using it consciously. It's also a way of connecting with your audience if you include yourself with them in a group by using words like we, us, our. You're all very familiar with rhetorical questions that do not require an answer and ask for effect only. They are awesome to use in interpretive and persuasive texts and feature articles in particular. I do ask that you use them sparingly though. If you overuse rhetorical questions, it can give your work a pleading tone, and you might want to be a little bit careful of that. Analogies. They're a comparison between one thing and another, typically for the purpose of explanation or clarification. By using an analogy, an author is able to explain a difficult concept quickly and succinctly. So saying, it is like this, it is like when you do that, as a way of making you understand what they're trying to say. You may find yourself using generalizations because, after all, this is an article, it's not a research essay, but be a little bit careful to balance your generalizations, which is taking something specific and applying it more broadly. You want to balance generalizations with actual evidence. Make sure that you don't sacrifice your credibility just to try and make it read nicely, but you will definitely be using them sometimes. There's some language to the right of this screen to show you what sort of words you might be using for that. Now, you're writing to an Australian audience, and humour is very much part of our language, of the way we communicate with each other, so it would be appropriate for you to use some humour in your article as a way of connecting with your audience. I would suggest you be a little bit careful because you aren't actually writing a humorous piece, you're actually writing an article, but certainly a little bit of humour to connect with your Australian audience would be entirely appropriate. You may find that you have to attack another side or attack another set of ideas. If that is the case, look at the different ways that you can do it. I've put some examples below, but be a little careful. For example, you'll notice one of them is the straw man and the ad hominem. Both of those use cautiously because people can be aware with the straw man, for instance, that you're misrepresenting someone's argument to make attack easier. If you do that and your reader spots it, they will think less of you. You will have less credibility. So when you are doing an attack, be very careful with the ways that you choose it. Appeals are a very successful way to position your reader to respond the way that you want to. Appeals are convincing arguments an author uses to appeal to the reader's sense of logic, ethics, and emotion. Here are four really, common ones. Appeal to authority, using information provided someone who is recognized as an expert in the subject. Appeal to fear, where you frighten your audience. Appeal to patriotism, where you appeal to their love of the country. Appeal to pride, where it's about maintaining their own dignity and self-respect. These can be quite strong appeals for an audience. Now, you've definitely come across the tricolon or triadic structure before. It's the rule of threes. It's a rhetorical term that consists of three parallel clauses, phrases, or words which happen to come in quick succession without any interruption. And the purpose of a tricolon is to give a greater sense of roundness, completeness, and wholeness, where the third part brings in a surprise effect in the sentence. They've got an example here. You are talking to a man who has laughed in the face of death, sneered at doom, and chuckled at catastrophe. So we're giving that lovely three-part structure that we find very aesthetically pleasing, and it's really a good way to give that sense that you've completed the idea or the sentence to your audience. Juxtaposition is two things being seen or placed close together with contrasting effect. An author will deliberately place contrasting ideas or images next to each other for a reason. You need to consider what that reason is, or when you're using it, why you're doing it. Why are you perhaps placing one of the Kardashians next to Greta Thunberg? Are you trying to show them as being frivolous and worthless? What are you trying to do? So why are you juxtaposing the two things together? Why is your text that you're looking at doing it? Look at how those two things go together. What are they both representing that you're using here, or that the author is using? Voice. In the literary sense, voice can be used to refer to the nature of the voice projected into text by its author, the persona, role of character adopted by an author. In your article, you need to have a clear idea of who you are so you can communicate that perspective to your audience. Are you one of them? Are you a person with authority to write? You need to decide, who are you? And guys, there will be a test. Go back over this, make sure that you know all the terms and the definitions.